My name is Deb. I'm an alcoholic. I was born in Minnesota a few years ago. Oldest of 4 children. I ended up in treatment at the age of 18, and then I went to a halfway house. I tried to commit suicide. My parents sent me to treatment. I went to the cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Then I went to a halfway house. And after the halfway house, I went back home. I was sober for 3 years. I went to AA once a week. I got a sponsor. I didn't do the steps. I don't even know how I made it for 3 years, but I made it sober for 3 years. And then after my 3 years, shortly after that, I celebrated and I drank. And my first, I went to treatment for drugs, and I thought alcohol was something that I didn't have a problem with, so it'd be okay for me to drink. So occasionally I would relapse, I would choose drinking, and I could put it down, and then I could drink, and there would always be like chaos, like the cops would come, or I would call someone and be suicidal, and so then I would stop for a little while, and then I would start again. And soon I realized that the problem I had with drugs became the problem I had with alcohol, and I couldn't stop drinking. I was in therapy, and my therapist wanted me to be sober for 2 weeks, and I couldn't get 2 weeks, so she decided that I'd go to treatment for a second time. So at 32 I went to treatment again, this time for alcohol. My insurance paid for 2 weeks, and then I went for 2 weeks outpatient. I was sober I remember I tried to keep it from my mom. I was really embarrassed. And my mom was really, really against drinking. She was raised by an alcoholic in Jacksonville, North Carolina. My dad was a Marine, and they got married, and then moved to Minnesota because that's where my dad's from. So my mom lived in Minnesota for 40 years, but she always wanted to make sure that her kids would become alcoholic. And so she would watch to make sure I wasn't drinking. So I think that's why I turned to the drugs, because she couldn't tell I was on drugs. But anyways, now back to going to treatment. I never told her that I went to treatment the second time. And one day in the treatment center, she calls, and I answer, and it's my mom. And she had called my husband, and she kept saying, where am I, and, where's my daughter? And my husband told her, and then she found out, and she was, kind of upset. I stayed sober for a while, off and on. I was sober more than I wasn't, but I spent many sleepless nights. Now I realize, now that I've been in the program for a little while, I'm realizing that it was, like a dry drunk. Like, I did not understand alcoholism. I thought, if you just drink once a month, that would be okay. But my mind was still dry, and my mind was still dysfunctional. And I would sit at night and, have many sleepless nights. I still have some sleepless nights, but it's a lot better. I think when I first moved to North Carolina, I was sober for a few months, and that was 2003. And my husband got in the Army. We moved here. I didn't know anyone. I thought AA would be a good place for me to socialize and get to know people and get some friends. So I started going to Sandalwood, and I really enjoyed the social part of it. I didn't do the steps. I got a sponsor, but I didn't do the steps. I hung out for a few years, relapsing every now and then. It was a lot of fun. I thought it was fun. But I didn't really do anything besides the social part. Then I decided, me and my sponsor that I had at the time, we decided that we were going to do the church thing. and we were going to, both stop AA. And I probably wasn't an alcoholic anyways, I told myself. And so we both stopped AA. We went and did the church thing, and it worked for a while, like probably 10 years. I drank a few times, but I was very, very frail. I remember my brother was doing some things, and I kept blaming myself and not realizing that I can't control what my brother does. After about, I want to say, 8 years, my sponsor moved away to Virginia, and I didn't really call her my sponsor. She was, like a friend, and she moved to Virginia. She lived there for a couple of years. Things got really chaotic for her, and in 2015 she died of an overdose, and I didn't even know that she was doing stuff that she was doing. She didn't talk to me a whole lot, and I never imagined that when we left AA that one of us wouldn't make it back. It wasn't even a thought. Well, then 2019, me and my husband were having some marital problems, and I started drinking. We moved into this nicer neighborhood, and the neighbors were always partying, so I started drinking more, and it was like a weekend thing. And then me and my husband started having problems. So he was working nights. I started drinking every night, and I know that I would drink every night. I would get drunk. I would call him at work, and I would sit and yell and scream at him all night while he was at work. And this happened for like 30 days. And I remember thinking, I never even thought what I did was wrong. I thought the problem was him, and he deserved this. And this is and the reason I drank was because of him. So 30 days went, and then I was like, you know what? I might need to go back to AA. So 2019, I went back to AA. That's when I met Dana, and she gave me the 12 and 12 and wrote her name in the book. I got a different lady to be my sponsor. I hung around for probably 3 months. And then, I was thinking, I've lived in the same house for 10 years, had the same job for probably back then it was like 9 years. I've been married to the same man for 20 some years. My kids still talk to me. I never lost them. I never got a DWI. I never went to jail. I never got arrested for anything. So I was like, I'm probably not an alcoholic. So I think I'm going to leave AA again. So I called my sponsor that I had then, and I told her that I probably wasn't an alcoholic and I was going to leave Alcoholics Anonymous. So, her and I went back and forth, and I really, really believed what I was saying. And we got off the phone, and I never went back. I did bring a neighbor that was drunk back to Sandalwood one time, but I was like, she's different than me. And then I would occasionally drink on the weekends. I remember I would pass out. The neighbors would take pictures of me and make fun of me. One time we played these night games, and I fell over a fence, and they took a picture of me laying on the ground, and they would make fun of me. But, I just thought that stuff's kind of normal. But whenever I drank, that happened. I would have too much, and so then I started drinking a little bit more. I decided that I could bring alcohol in the house, so I would drink maybe a couple of times during the week. My husband was making moonshine, so we were drinking moonshine, and I was still drinking in the bars a little bit. My friend had a birthday. One of my best friends had a birthday, and this was in March, and so I went to Twisted Grape to celebrate her birthday. I had 12 blue motorcycles. I left without paying my tab. When I got home, everybody was calling me because I had left and I didn't pay my tab. So my husband had to bring me back to pay my tab. It was really embarrassing. And it was an expensive tab. So I went back, paid my tab, came back home. I was throwing up for like 3 hours. I fell down the stairs. I broke my tailbone. I was in excruciating pain for like 3 months. It was horrible. I deliver pizzas for a living. I could hardly sit in the car. I got this donut thing. Sitting, standing, anything, it was just like pain. And it was excruciating. And I went to the chiropractor. There's nothing you can do about it. It's the nerve endings. Then my best friend that I had went, she no longer talks to me. I said some stuff to her. I told her that I was done with her, and it was her birthday. That she was selfish and, all this other stuff. And we still don't really have a strong relationship to this day. Some of the relationships in my life have came back, but some of them have not. Then COVID came, and I am scared of lots of things. I have a lot of fears and phobias. And I realized that that's part of why I drank. I'm scared of uncooked food. I'm scared of getting sick. I'm scared of salmonella. I'm scared of E. coli. I'm scared of a lot of things. My dad was a meat inspector, a USDA meat inspector, so he used to tell me about all this stuff and scared me half to death. So when COVID came, I was really scared. And then I realized that if I drank, I wouldn't be so scared. And so then I started drinking every night. And I would think about COVID and I would drink. And I started doing this control drink, and I realized that if I drank in the bars, then it was like open season, like I wouldn't stop. So at home, I would buy this vodka, and I would keep it a big bottle, and I would keep it way up in the cupboard, and I had a smaller bottle of vodka, and I had these shot glasses, and I would try and keep it to 5 shots a night. And some nights I was not very successful. Most of the time I was, because once I put it away, I would shut it, and I would tell myself that I couldn't go back. Now, I thought about it a lot, and most of the time I was drunk, but it would stop me from getting to the pukey drunk. And then I would put 3 water bottles by my bed, and every night I would get up and drink some of this water, and it would help me from getting dehydrated. And this worked for a while. And I remember one day I was going to work, and I felt so like one side of the road, once I crossed this one side of the road, it was like hitting a thunderstorm. So it was so gloomy. I was like, it just overcame me. It started at the top of my head and it went all the way to the bottom. Like, it was like doom and gloom. It took over my whole insides. And now I realize that it was like the last rock blocking off God. It had just covered the last rock. And I knew it was from drinking. I knew that the way I was feeling was from drinking. I remember thinking, this is from drinking every night. Like, I'm losing all of my insides. And I didn't know at the time, but it was me blocking myself off from God. And I didn't stop drinking though. And I knew it was from my drinking, but I did not stop. I continued. And some nights it got really bad. I was still trying to control it. I decided that I went to this this party, and somebody had bought me some wine. And I don't drink wine because it gives me heartburn. But this certain wine, I brought it home and I drank it. It didn't give me heartburn. And it was Stella Rose. And so I thought, well, I'm going to start buying some of this. Because you can drink this with your meal. I could drink it with my bubble bath. Like, in my head, it was okay to drink wine before 5 o'clock. So then I would start buying this wine from this Grapes and Hobbs place by my house. And it was like $8 or $9, maybe $12. I think it was like $12 a bottle. Well, I would drink a whole bottle. And I remember Marcus saying, this is getting kind of expensive. maybe you should go back to vodka. But I was drinking the vodka and the Stella Rose. I was drinking both. But for it to do anything, I would have to drink the whole bottle. So I remember one time we went out to eat at Wendy's with my daughter, and I wanted to go to the Grapes and Hobbs place, and it was about ready to close, but the line at Wendy's was really long, so I told my husband I'd just run to Stella. I'd run to Grapes and Hobbs to get the wine while they went out to eat, and I did that. Now I just think that's just crazy that I would, run half a mile to the Grapes and Hobbs to make sure I got my wine. And then then I realized that they sold it at Walmart. And then I, did the Stella Rose, I think it was black, and then the Stella Rose blueberry. Those two didn't give me heartburn. But they were expensive, and I didn't get an effect that I liked that I got from vodka. I remember 2017, I had double bypass open heart surgery. And when I was there, my liver enzymes were off. So they did an ultrasound of my liver, and then they said I had a fatty liver. And they asked me if I drank, and I said, not that much. Well, then they said it was probably from the medicine I was on. I can remember sitting and doing shots and thinking, should I be concerned about this fatty liver? But I just kept doing them. And I was taking the medicine and drinking on top of it. I didn't care. I don't think I could really help myself. And so then after about a year of COVID, maybe a little bit longer, I started working with this girl. And I remember seeing her at Sandalwood. When I was leaving, she was just getting there. So every now and then, her and I would talk about Alcoholics Anonymous. And one day she said, well, my sponsor said you should read this page in the big book. And I said, first of all, I drink every day, but my life is not unmanageable. And I believe that my life is not unmanageable because I had all the things I talked about. Because I had my house and my husband and my kids talked to me. But, I was so suicidal. Anything could push me over the edge. I was very weak-minded. I was very frail. I was a shell of myself. I remember sitting with my kids one time, and I was just like, I remember it was such a big part to raise them. But then I was like, now that they're older, I just felt like I couldn't be what they needed me to be. And that was because I was losing all of my integrity inside in my brain, for myself. Because I knew what I do. I knew that I was an alcoholic deep down and that I couldn't stop. But I tried to hide it. And the disease of alcoholism in me is very cunning, baffling, and powerful. It talked me into leaving AA because God had healed me of alcoholism. And the only way to prove that would be to drink. That's crazy. But I did it. And so now I realize that I have to. I'm still kind of scared. My sobriety date is April 1st, 2021. So I am 17 months and I think 23 days sober. But in those 17 months, I've learned a lot. But I'm still scared. I'm scared of becoming what I was. I'm grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm grateful for the things that I've learned. I feel like my brain is connecting on other cylinders than it did before. I feel some emotions coming, which are a little bit scary and hard to deal with because I don't like to deal with emotions. That's why I drank. I would run from fear, phobias, and emotions. And after I was on the year binge and talking to my friend at work, I just started reading the big book while I was drinking. And looking up those pages she told me to look up. And then I went to a 7 a.m. meeting. Then I remember looking for Dana's phone number in the 12 and 12, and I started texting her. Because I thought, I'm not going to get her number from anyone. I remember she gave it to me, so I dug out my 12 and 12, and I started texting her. And we talked a few times while I was drinking. I don't know how many times, probably multiple. Then I tried to get sober. I couldn't make it 4 days. And then I would drink and I'd pick up another white chip. And I met this girl at AA and she just said, keep picking up white chips. So that's what I did. I just kept picking up white chips. I had 4 days sober and I started getting chest pains. And so I went to the doctor, and being a heart patient, they kept me, and they realized that the widowmaker, I had my widowmaker was stented, so I had a vein taken out of my leg and put in my widowmaker, and that was failing. So they had to stent my widowmaker, which was a high-risk surgery. So they stented my widowmaker, and I stayed in the hospital for a couple of weeks, and I did this day 4 sober. So then I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. So it kind of got me past the hump. My sponsor says it was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I really believe that today. I don't know if I would have made it, but God helped me. I got put on blood thinners. And I had an episode where I was bleeding out through my groin. And they had to hold it, and it was like blood going everywhere. I was getting some bloody noses because of the blood thinners they were putting me on. So I realized that when I read, I could not drink or I could bleed to death. So I was really, really scared to drink. And then I was like, now I got to stay sober. And I remember in that year, there was like 5 times that I'm really sure I would have drank had I not been on blood thinners. Because all I could think about is that day bleeding in the bathroom, in the bathroom at the hospital. And so I would go to as many meetings as I could. I talked to my sponsor all the time. We at least text every day, still. And I know that I'm a handful, even still. But I am really, really grateful. I'm grateful for her. This is a lot. Alcoholics Anonymous is a lot to learn and a lot to take in. But about 10 months I got sponsees. I got one, and then I got another one, and now I have a few, and I'm really, really grateful for my sponsees. When I was just in vacation in Minnesota in August, and I was hanging around a campfire with my in-laws' family, and they drink a lot. I had just come back from an AA meeting, actually. And I got around the fire, and it was dark, and there's like 25 people around this fire. And they had this little table over here, and that's where they were doing all the shots. So I thought I was safe over here. Well, what they were doing was they were making shots for everybody in the circle. So they just started passing them down. So like all of a sudden I got a shot in my hand, and I'm passing it down. And all of a sudden it ended, and I had a shot in my hand. And at that moment, I was thinking, I could drink this shot. And then I was like, I want to just smell it. And but I didn't. And through the fire, I could see my husband looking at me. He was probably like, what's she going to do, And I think I could have called my sponsor and said I drank. But I don't know if I could have called my 5 sponsees and told them I drank. So I chose to put it to the side and tell this guy I don't drink, and give it to the side. And I was really, really grateful at that moment. And that's when I realized that this disease, you don't know. I mean, it's a miracle that I'm sober today. Because there's lots of moments that I could have chose to drink in this 17 months. And I'm really, really grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm really grateful that they have meetings everywhere. I'm really grateful. I went to Minnesota to a meeting, and I was convinced that they didn't have the same AA North Carolina did. Because when I was trying to get sober before, I think I would have done something if they were saying it. I went there and I got the same message. And it was me. It was me not listening. It was me, calling my sponsor after I drank. It was me not doing the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And at that moment, I realized that, it's not me doing it now either. It's God and me giving it to God. But I'm still learning, and I'm still realizing that I have to take this one day at a time, because I want to jump ahead so much. I want to go into the past, and I want to jump ahead. I get scared. And this is where my sleepless nights come now, is when I start jumping into the future, like I can run myself right into quicksand. And so I have to pray, and I have to pray for God's will and not my will. And I did not learn that in church. I learned that at Alcoholics Anonymous. When I was in church, I prayed for a lot of selfish things. And now I pray for God's will. And before, when I wouldn't pray for God's will, that tells me I didn't trust Him. And today I trust Him more than I ever have. When I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous 17 months ago, lots of the meetings I would come to, I would go late. Because, the readings, I hear those readings all the time. And the readings were just words to me. And then one day, I was listening to them, and I listened to the promises, and that, it gave me goosebumps. And so I realized that I wasn't going to come late to Alcoholics Anonymous anymore, because those readings are life to me. They are who I am. Even though I might be like a high bottom drunk, my brain was not very functioning. And I think I would have probably started going through some psychosis or some mental problems if I wouldn't have gotten sober when I did. And so I realized, now when I look back at it, and now that I'm not saying all of my cylinders are functioning, but I have more cylinders functioning in my brain than I ever did. And I realized that it doesn't matter how much I drank or if I was drinking at the time, that the disease of alcoholism centers in my brain. It's the way I think. And so I have to keep learning about alcoholism and keep learning that my thinking is what got me here. And so I can't rely on my own thinking to get me out of here. I have to listen to people at Alcoholics Anonymous and my sponsor and the 12 steps and read the big book. I have to do all those things and work with other alcoholics. And that's what helps me stay sober today. I think my children don't totally understand, but they support me and they see a change in me because they're very, very supportive of me staying sober. And it seems like they have less of me now. We were just at the function in Carthage at the airport. They had the food rodeo for Pick and Pig, so we were there with them. Well, they left together and they went to my son's house. And normally I probably would have went with them, but I had to come speak here. But they understand and they're so supportive, even though they don't totally understand alcoholism. But I think it's because they realize that I'm more of a person in Alcoholics Anonymous than I am when I'm drinking. And this is, it's like my mom died in 2015 from kidney disease, but she had to go to dialysis before she died, and she had to go once a week or she would have died. So Alcoholics Anonymous is like my dialysis. I will die if I don't continue with my dialysis. So this is my dialysis. To drink is to die for me. Maybe slowly, but it is still to die. And so today, I am forever grateful for the sobriety I have today, for just today. I'm grateful for you guys letting me come here. I am a little nervous. I've only spoke at Sandalwood, my home group, and they shut the lights off there. And I was like, oh crap, the lights are going to be on. So I've never spoken in the light. So they have this podium and this light shines down on you, and it's really like you can't even see all the people. You just have this light shining in your face. It's kind of like the cops, but so this is the first time I've spoken the light. But I'm grateful that you guys let me come and share my story. I know I have about 15 minutes left. I'm trying to think of something else to say. My sponsees, working with sponsees, that's a great thing. Having sponsees and being able to work with other alcoholics. Now that I understand some of the things that I understand, and I've been doing this for 17 months. I'm like, I don't know nearly what my sponsor knows. And some days I'm like, I hope that I can be half of what my sponsor is to me to them. Because, I don't know a whole lot, but I'm learning every day, and I'm really, really grateful for the opportunity. And when I read about stuff in the big book and I see how it's set up, how there's no leaders in Alcoholics Anonymous, how they set this up so many years ago, and how it's worked, and now it's, and millions of people are part of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it works. It works for a lot of people. It's worked for me. And one of the great things is that AA doesn't give up on anyone. I went to treatment in 1988, and now I'm sitting up here, 50-some years old, with not even 2 years, but, AA don't give up on nobody, and I'm really, really grateful for that. I think it's the only thing that I've ever run across that doesn't give up on you, and that's a big deal. That's why, like what Dana was saying, is, when somebody drunk comes across your path, you don't ever know, and I'm glad she spoke to me. She spoke to me many times in the evening when I was drinking, and I was very suicidal. I think one time I said I wanted a bullet to my head, that was the best thing and that was what I deserved. And I felt like that for many, many years. Drinking or not drinking, it's because at the time it was untreated alcoholism, whether I was sober or not, because I wasn't dealing with my alcoholism. I wasn't dealing with my disease. I wasn't getting my dialysis. So it was killing me, even though I might have put the cork in the bottle for a few months or a few years. And it always came back. Always. And it, like I could sit up here. I think my first AA meeting, I talked about how I wasn't an alcoholic. And and I was sitting in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's crazy today to think that I sat in a meeting and I tried to convince everybody in there I wasn't an alcoholic. Like, what are you doing at an alcoholic? What are you doing at an AA meeting then? Like, what's your purpose? But it was because I was not thinking clearly. It was my job to try and convince myself I wasn't an alcoholic. So that's what, I would go into AA and I would convince everybody in my life I was an alcoholic, and then I would decide to quit, and then I'd have to convince everybody that I wasn't an alcoholic. This took a lot of work. And now I think I'm past that point, I think if I were to tell my husband I wasn't an alcoholic today, I don't think he would believe me. And that's the risk I took, But, one day I was sitting and I was thinking, I could either be drinking or I could be helping people. And, when I drank, I hurt people. So I could be hurting people or I could be helping people. And over here, on the drinking part, I thought it helped me deal with my fears and my phobias, But it just, I mean, when I woke up in the morning, they were still there, and they were worse. Or I could help people and deal with the disease that I have. And this side is much better. But sometimes the disease tries to convince me that this is better. And so that is when I need to think all the way through with all my cylinders. And, you know, that's where I am today. One day at a time, staying sober today, not worrying about tomorrow, and not thinking about the past. And I'm really, really grateful. And I think that's about it. Thanks for letting me share.